Hi, my name is Nava Milliken. I'm the Executive Director and Chief Curator of the Museum for Art in Wood, and we are sitting in the middle of the exhibition Fruition. This exhibition marks the 27th iteration of Warpwood, the Windgate Arts Residency Program in Wood, formerly known as the International Turning Exchange. It is a residency like no other. It's not like a residency where you're in the middle of the forest in a solitary situation where you can ponder and think and listen to the sounds of nature. We have our artists in the middle of Philadelphia, looking at and being influenced by the architecture, the pace, and the interactions that the city offers, and then creating their work in response to that experience in the material of wood. Every year, the residency exhibition shows how much the material offers artists and how many different creative practices can take place within this material. You have so much range in this exhibition. You have people who are making images with the material and combining it with printmaking. You have people who are creating interactive works mechanically, but still dependent on the material in order to bring their concept to fruition. You have people who are talking about process, and people who are talking about furniture, people are talking about the home, and people who are talking about very personal things that they've experienced. So this is just one example of the challenge that artists bring to this experience, and then how they communicate with the public through the exhibition.
All of this work, when I boil it down, is about home and about stability and about memory. I am 34 years old and I have lived in 34 places in that amount of time, so it's a lot of moving around. And all of these staircases I built, each one represents a home that I had at some point in my life. A lot of this work is about memory, so a lot of the woods I use kind of have certain memories imbued in them. And also I was very consciously, as I was making each set of stairs, thinking about that place and thinking about memories of those places. Each one has kind of little details that, for me, are representative of each of those places I lived. Really, this process was very exploratory for me. I didn't have a strong idea of what I wanted to do when I got here. And so I spent about 5 weeks really just branching out and trying new things. I had been making this stair motif just in my free time with scraps of wood. And so I just thought I'd explore that. And one night when I was taking a shower, I kind of realized the crux of everything, that each one of these would represent a house that I lived in.
The artists come from all over the world, this year from all over the US. And they spend 2 months with us in here in Philadelphia. They live and work together, so there is this instance of collaboration that's invited through their proximity to each other. The 2 months is completely theirs to experiment, to expose themselves to new experiences, to learn about the city, and to learn about each other. At the end of those 2 months, we open an exhibition that features the work and the ideas of the residents during their time here.
My name is Sara Watlington. I live in Los Angeles, California. I am trained as a furniture maker and have spent the last decade or so making furniture mostly out of wood. I am using this residency as a chance to make more non-functional sculpture and exploring new materials like concrete. The concrete was what I was drawn to when I first got here, because I knew I wanted to explore new materials, and I also had a goal for the summer to create new pathways of creativity for myself. Woodworking is a very rigid and structured way of making, and you have to know what you're going to do very clearly before you execute it. And so playing with the concrete, I first started just casting in trash, kind of exploring like the negative space of things that we discard. And then it morphed into casting in bags, and I'm able to like form the bags really organically in real time by like strapping them and hanging them to create these like kind of very strange amorphous blobs. The play between that and the type of woodworking I do, which is very rectilinear, has been really fun. The goal is to have one tall sculpture. There will be this viewing diorama sculpture. And I also brought with me a piece that I finished in the spring, which is a ceramic-bodied turntable and speakers.
The mix of fellowships is one way that we look to establish some heterogeneity between the artists in the cohort. We want those discussions to be rich. So if we were to have 8 vessel makers in a group, that would be less desirable than to have somebody who maybe has a furniture background, somebody who's looking at sculpture or installation work. That to the museum makes a stronger group than a group of people who are just working in the same vein.
My name is Melissa Engler and I'm from Asheville, North Carolina. The work I'm currently doing is focused around endangered species, ecosystems, biodiversity loss. I started out as a furniture maker, but I primarily work sculpturally now, and I've been doing that for the last 10 years. And so this residency is a really great opportunity for me to kind of cut out the noise and just really focus on what I want to make. And so this piece is about a specific wildlife refuge called the Driftless Refuge. This particular refuge has this amazing, very small snail, and it's just like this big, maybe between my 2 fingernails. And it has been around for 400,000 years. And we are actually in the process of reducing its habitat so much that it's endangered now. So this piece is about that snail. This is obviously a much enlarged version of it. And then within that same refuge, there is a wild monkshood flower, which is also endangered. And so my thoughts coming into this residency were about taking kind of excerpts or little vignettes from these places and putting them together in a way that invites people to notice all the little things that are kind of disappearing as we are just going about our everyday lives. I don't usually do a ton of detailed drawings, and so I sometimes sit here and I do these sketches in foam. So I'll just take a block of foam and cut into it with like a box cutter. And this really helps me understand the form better than if I draw it. And this will be kind of loosely based on a monarch caterpillar, kind of like a ghostly monarch caterpillar to think about and talk about. So this is a really nice wood in that it is easy to hand carve. It's yellow cedar and it's got a very clear, kind of clean, beautiful grain that I'm trying to honor those patterns.
My name's Chance Coalter. I'm from San Diego, California. I do kind of like a broad range of work. I like to kind of push myself technically, so I'm always trying new things, mostly building chairs and tables, and I do like to shape wood, so I consider myself kind of a sculptor in that way. So I like fluidity in my forms. I've made multiple like sphere jewelry cabinets. I love the challenge of how does this sphere blend with like a rectilinear shape in the bench seat, and how can that be fluid? I started sketching this bench years ago, and when I arrived at Next Fab and saw the space that was here and some of the equipment that they had, it was suitable for this type of work. So I kind of decided, like, let's finish designing and building this bench. And so I spent the first few weeks here just modeling it out. I made like, I don't know, like 8 to 10 little models of the bench, and it kept closing up and it kind of became these little spheres on the sides. The bench is just over 8 feet long. It's meant to seat 3 people. The spheres are about 24 inches in diameter. I basically built it out of 100 board feet of hard maple, which is a pretty heavy material, but it's a relatively affordable material, and I think it's good for this type of work because it's got such tight pores that it doesn't seem to crack and things like that. It's like over 400 pieces. There's a lot of challenges with this kind of work. The planning needs to be really spot on because it's built in layers, and again, there's so many different pieces. So just trying to think through like the form and how it's going to change, because each layer is like building off of the previous layer and then changing. So it's really hard to like pre-plan where all the pieces are going to be.
Another less expected or less obvious aspect of bringing artists to spend 2 months here in Philadelphia is they're actually able to generally find enough material to work with. A lot of what you see here in the exhibition and the work in it is actually salvaged wood from the streets of Philadelphia or from its artists and makers.
I'm Jodie Prud'homme. I came out here from the San Francisco Bay Area. I am a furniture maker by training. In more recent times, I've explored work that's more form forward than it is function forward. And I have a real deep appreciation for working in wood, and I try very hard to select the right piece of wood for the piece I'm working on. And I pay very close attention to how I use the grain, how the wood fits into the work as I'm going along. So when I came into the residency, I didn't have a project in mind. I was looking around for materials and for inspiration. Once I got to Philadelphia, we paid a visit to the organic recycling yard, and I came across a stump there of ash that had died from the ash boring beetle. And it had all of these beautiful trails left behind from the insect. And it had some pieces of bark still intact. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it. I just knew that I was really struck by the visuals of those trails. And when I got it back, I just started exploring what I wanted to do with those trails, how I wanted to highlight them and bring them forward. So I started doing some gilding on the trails in faux gold leaf. And I thought about making one small project that is 2 coopered triptych panels from a section of this stump, where one curved panel displays the trails that are from the inside of the bark, and the other that displays the same trails, mirror image from the first layer of sapwood. So these 2 panels sort of speak to each other. I find the insect trails really appealing to me because if I were to try to make something that random and that chaotic, I could never do it. So to be able to find something that irregular, and even in their randomness and in their chaos, they come together to form like a cohesive visual in the wood itself. I just find it pretty fascinating.
We have a fellowship position for a documentary artist who is embedded with the artists working in the material and documents in their own medium the work that's happening during the 2 months of the residency.
I'm Molly, a multimedia artist based in Minneapolis, and I'm very excited to be here as the documentary artist. As a professional, I've worked more with just straightforward video creation, and so I want to take this opportunity to try and branch out and get back to those more like experiential, experimental roots and see how I can translate all that I've experienced with the residents this summer into an experience that's maybe a little more artistically driven than narratively driven. I have a workstation just like all the wood artists. Mine is a little bit separated from them because wood is a very dusty medium and cameras don't like that. So I'm sort of on the outside of this cage that houses all of their workstations, and I can see into the cage. But I'm often editing throughout the day, and then I've got my camera by my side, and when I see something interesting or someone's about to create something that they want to capture, I jump on it and start recording. And I've been very much in documentary mode, so creating these weekly blog posts capturing what the artists are doing and the art they're creating. And it's sort of settling in that I too am a resident artist and will be having something in the final exhibition. So I'm now trying to figure out, with all the material I've collected, what is the best way I can translate that into a gallery experience? So instead of creating a video that has a start and a finish that I expect people to sit through for the gallery. I'd like to maybe explore more of a video collage and play with projection and play with just sort of creating a visual mood board that captures the progression the residents move through each week in a way that feels appropriate for a gallery setting versus just like sitting in front of a screen.
My name is Sara Tabbert, and I'm from Fairbanks, Alaska, and I am by training a woodcut printmaker, but I'm sort of drifting further and further afield into woodworking. These are mixed media pieces that involve primarily printmaking as well as marquetry, which is making images using cut and fitted pieces of wood veneer, and I used carving and printed areas as well as some sandblasting and some other things to create the images. I find the things that you can do with the color and texture of using wood veneer really appealing, and also as an artist who often has to either ship my work long distances or ship my materials long distances, wood veneer is about a fraction of an inch in thickness, and it's portable and practical. I came here with the idea that I was going to work from what I saw here. It provided me with an excuse, a good excuse to spend a lot of time exploring Philadelphia. Some of the things that I was interested in exploring were the age of the city, the way old and new kind of is forced together in interesting and uncomfortable ways. Watching the old houses come down somewhat in real time and the condos go up. I was interested in the way that nature gets kind of compressed into these empty lots and vacant areas. So the pieces behind me refer to some of the things that I've seen here in Philadelphia. I think both reflect the kind of collision of the natural world and the built world together, fences and gates and gardens, and the way in a compressed space all of these sort of contradictory elements line up together is something that I'm really interested in.
Finally, there is a scholar fellowship, and that is usually a researcher or a writer or an historian or a curator who comes and joins the cohort at some point during the 2 months and uses the experience of being together with the fellows to augment their research in some way. And this year, for the first time, our scholar fellow has brought the prompt and the focus of her current research not only to the residents in the exhibition, whose work is in the exhibition, but also to the audience and the visiting public.
My name is Folayemi Wilson. I'm an artist and a designer and educator and a writer, and I'm the 2024 Warpwood Scholar in Residence. In the middle of the 8-week residency period, I spent about a week with the other residents, and I queried them about some of the questions I'm pursuing in my own research around wood as a material. We are so removed as a culture from the food that we eat and how it gets produced, and the wood that we use and the clothes that we wear. Much of the wood material we use has been somewhat industrialized through various processes. So the major question I asked them was, well, what is a tree? I also, in addition to having conversations with the residents about this question, what is a tree, I provided them with a slice of a felled cherry tree that I found at the recycling center in Philadelphia. And if they had time, I asked them to actually make something that was representative of their response to the question. And then you also hear some of their answers to the question that our resident Molly recorded in audio and edited together as one piece. And then the second thing was we wanted to give the visitors a chance to document their answer to the same question. So there's post-it notes where people can write their answers to what is a tree. My research had started, and then this was kind of one stop along the way. And so I'll be continue my work around looking at trees, and I'm looking at them as allies in liberation and resistance, trees as archive and trees as memory. And the life of a tree is marked within it, like in rings and opening from funguses. And in particular, I'm very curious if a tree would remember or note somewhere in its material life evidence of being used as something as horrifying as a lynching. And I plan to visit 20th century sites if I can locate them and locate trees that were involved in those spectacles.
My name is Brittany Rudolph. I currently live in Portland, Oregon. I work as a full-time fabricator for the Science Museum. I studied furniture design and sculpture and then went on to get my master's in craft and design. And my work in wood is primarily furniture adjacent, so nothing really functional, really playful. It tends to be kind of autobiographical, and I use a lot of different processes with that. The project that I'm working on is the beginnings of a body of work I'm calling the Dark Sky Sanctuary. And it is work that is drawn from the intersections of science and spirituality, because those are avenues that we typically look towards when we're trying to find answers for things. It's mainly about sort of grief and like the ambiguity of loss, both like personal and with the world. The For Certain piece is the collection of obsidian stones that are bound and mounted in these 10 to 12 4x4 frames. Wood, I would say, is sort of central component, but there are fibers, there are natural elements like stone that I'm not altering, and they'll be displayed on the wall in a big arc. And there is a lectern that I've built that displays one of those pieces. So as you approach it, you'll have an intimate look at one of them, and then the rest of them will kind of surround on the wall. The obsidian it's actually Apache tears, so they are not quite obsidian. They haven't formed crystals because they cool too quickly, so they're actually translucent. And so I've embedded LEDs in the back of them to highlight that translucency. I've also been really inspired by all of the other residents and what their processes are. So I've tried out carving, which is a thing that I haven't done a lot of. Started working with reed, which another fellow is making baskets. That's been really fun to sort of like watch the others create their things and be inspired by those different processes and figuring out how I can incorporate that into the work.